Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome once again to Ancient Epics, the place where the greatest stories of humanity come back to life. Long before the maps of the North were filled with neat borders and measured roads, there existed a terror whispered in candlelit halls and carved into the margins of memory. In the cold lands of Scandinavia, where iron was drawn from bogs and forests swallowed the sun for weeks at a time, tales were told of princes born not fully human. One such legend spoke of a royal child whose fate was sealed before his first breath, a creature bound by ancient forces older than kingship itself. This was not merely a monster story meant to frighten children, but a reflection of deep fears held by early medieval societies, fears of inheritance, of bloodlines gone wrong, and of the wild powers believed to dwell beneath the earth. Archaeologists have uncovered dragon-shaped carvings on Viking Age runestones and wooden stave churches, symbols scholars associate with chaos, protection, and liminal power. The Lindworm, a serpent-like dragon without wings, appears again and again in Scandinavian folklore, its coiled body echoing the twisting rivers and mountain paths of the north. To ancient minds, such creatures were not fantasy alone. Fossilized remains of large prehistoric animals, unearthed in mines and riverbanks, may have fueled beliefs that vast serpents once ruled the land. The night sky itself seemed to confirm these fears, as the constellation Draco wound endlessly around the northern heavens, never setting, always watching. From this soil of fear and wonder emerged the tale of the Lindworm Prince, a story not of conquest alone, but of patience, courage, and the slow unraveling of a curse that bound flesh and fate together. In a kingdom shaped by pine forests and stony hills, there ruled a king and queen long troubled by silence in their halls. Seasons passed, harvests rose and fell, yet no child's footsteps echoed through the palace. In an age when lineage meant survival, this absence weighed heavily upon the throne. The queen, desperate for an heir, sought counsel beyond the court. In some tellings preserved in medieval Danish and Swedish collections, she turned to wise women skilled in herbal lore, figures who existed on the fringes of society, yet were quietly relied upon in moments of despair. A potion was prepared from roots gathered at dawn, perhaps inspired by real plants such as henbane or mugwort, both known in Norse herbal tradition and associated with altered states and fertility rites. The queen drank, and her wish was answered, but not in the way hoped for. In time she gave birth to a son, yet the child bore the form of a lindworm, a long, scaled body with a human face and burning eyes that reflected more than animal instinct. Horror and shame filled the court, and the creature was hidden away in a deep stone chamber beneath the palace, a place reminiscent of real underground storehouses used in Iron Age Scandinavia to preserve food and valuables. Years passed, and another child was born, this time fully human, strong and fair. The younger prince was raised openly, trained in arms and law, while his elder brother remained in darkness, growing larger and more dangerous with each season. The Lindworm Prince fed upon livestock and in darker versions of the tale, demanded the lives of brides promised to him, a grim echo of sacrificial motifs found in early Germanic mythology. Such sacrifices, though never proven as historical practice in this form, symbolized the belief that great power required great cost. As the younger prince came of age, the kingdom faced an impossible choice. To secure peace, a bride was promised to the Lindworm, yet none survived the wedding night. The creature's hunger was not merely for flesh, but for release from the skin that bound him. At last, a woman of keen mind and quiet bravery came forward. In some versions she was a princess from a distant land, in others a maiden of humble birth, reflecting the medieval understanding that wisdom was not confined to rank. Guided by ancestral knowledge and careful observation, she devised a plan rooted not in steel, but in endurance. She arrived clad in layers of garments, linen, wool, and leather materials common to early Scandinavian dress, each representing a shedding of fear. When the Lindworm demanded she remove them, she did so slowly, one by one, insisting he shed his skin in return. Through the long night, this ritual continued, mirroring the natural process of serpents molting, a phenomenon well known to people who lived close to the land. By dawn, the final skin was cast aside, and the Lindworm stood revealed as a human prince, freed at last from the curse placed upon him before birth. The transformation was not sudden or violent, but gradual and earned, reflecting a worldview in which true change required patience and balance. The elder prince was restored to humanity, and the kingdom, once fractured by fear, found harmony again. The tale of the Lindworm Prince endured not because of its monster, but because of its message. In the cold north, where survival depended on understanding nature rather than conquering it, this story reminded its listeners that even the most terrible forms might conceal something worthy beneath. As firelight flickered against timber walls and snow fell silently beyond them, this legend passed from generation to generation, coiling itself into the cultural memory of Scandinavia, where it remains to this day. The dawn that followed the breaking of the curse did not arrive with thunder or celebration, but with a pale northern light creeping slowly across the land. In the high latitudes of Scandinavia, dawn often comes hesitantly, especially in the seasons when night still clings to the earth. This soft light revealed the chamber where the Lindworm had dwelled, now strewn with discarded skins that glistened like old bark shed from a tree. Such imagery would have resonated deeply with early medieval listeners, for the cycle of shedding and renewal was visible everywhere in their world, from snakes emerging in spring to forests renewing themselves after harsh winters. The prince who rose from that chamber was no longer the terror hidden beneath stone. He stood as a man marked by ordeal, his body bearing the memory of years spent bound in another form. Medieval Scandinavian literature often described heroes as shaped by suffering rather than untouched by it, and this prince fit that ancient pattern. His eyes, once said to glow with hunger, now held restraint and reflection, qualities prized in rulers of a land where impulsive decisions could doom entire communities. The woman who freed him did not claim glory. In surviving versions of the tale recorded by folklorists such as Sven Grundtvig and later scholars of Nordic oral tradition, her wisdom was portrayed as quiet and deliberate. She understood that the curse was not meant to be shattered by force. This aligns with broader Germanic mythic structures, where binding and unbinding often carry more power than outright destruction. The gods themselves were bound by oaths, by fate, and by cycles that could not be escaped, only endured. When the prince was brought before the court, silence fell once more upon the hall, but this time it was not born of fear. The elder son, long thought lost to monstrosity, now stood revealed as the rightful heir by birth. Yet the years of concealment had altered the natural order of succession. The younger prince, raised openly and trained to rule, had already earned the loyalty of warriors and elders alike. Such tension reflects real historical struggles in early Scandinavian kingdoms, where unclear succession often led to conflict, as evidenced by sagas describing feuds between brothers and cousins vying for legitimacy. In this tale, however, bloodshed was avoided. The elder prince, shaped by years of isolation, did not seek to displace his brother. Instead, he recognized that rulership was more than birthright. It was responsibility carried for the good of the people. This idea mirrors evolving medieval concepts of kingship influenced by Christian moral thought spreading through Scandinavia between the 9th and 12th centuries, where a ruler's virtue increasingly mattered alongside lineage. The kingdom entered a period of renewal. Fields once neglected due to fear of the Lindworm's hunger were cultivated again. Livestock multiplied, and trade routes reopened. Archaeological evidence from the Viking Age shows how closely prosperity was tied to stability. Hoards buried during times of unrest, later unearthed by modern scholars, speak to communities preparing for disaster. In the world of the Lindworm Prince, peace allowed such fears to fade, and wealth was no longer hidden beneath the soil. Yet the memory of the curse was not erased. The elder prince chose not to forget what he had been. In some tellings, he ordered the chamber beneath the palace sealed but not destroyed, preserving it as a reminder of the fragile boundary between order and chaos. This echoes the Scandinavian relationship with dangerous places, bogs, caves, and deep forest sites both feared and revered. Many Iron Age bogs have yielded ritual offerings, suggesting that people believed certain forces were best acknowledged rather than denied. The lindworm itself, though no longer embodied, remained present in symbol. Dragon motifs continued to adorn ships' shields and later church carvings. Scholars have noted that even after the Christianization of Scandinavia, serpent imagery persisted, transformed rather than eliminated. The lindworm came to represent trials overcome, internal darkness mastered, and the wisdom gained through endurance. As years passed, the elder prince took on a new role within the kingdom. Often portrayed as a guardian of boundaries between law and wildness, mercy and justice. This role reflects ancient cosmological ideas. In Norse belief, the great Midgard serpent encircled the world, maintaining the balance between chaos and order. The Lindworm Prince, once a monster himself, now stood as a living reminder of that balance within human society. The woman who freed him was honored, yet her story was often told without excessive ornament. This restraint aligns with early Scandinavian storytelling traditions where understatement carried power. Her act was remembered not as defiance, but as harmony with natural law. She understood the rhythm of shedding and renewal, a knowledge passed down through generations who observed animals, seasons, and stars with patient attention. Even the sky seemed to echo the tale. The constellation Draco, winding endlessly around the northern pole, never dips below the horizon in Scandinavian latitudes. To ancient observers, this eternal presence suggested watchfulness and continuity. The lindworm was never entirely gone. It remained above, a reminder that ancient forces endure even as their forms change. Thus, the story moved beyond a simple transformation. It became a meditation on inheritance, patience, and the hidden cost of desperate wishes. Parents who heard the tale were reminded that not every desire should be seized without care. Rulers were warned that power gained through fear would always demand a reckoning. Communities learned that what is hidden does not cease to grow. As generations gathered around hearth fires, listening to the crackle of pine logs and the whisper of winter winds, the tale of the Lindworm Prince was retold with reverence. Each telling shaped it slightly, as oral traditions always do, yet its core endured. It was a story born from landscapes of stone and forest, shaped by the slow rhythms of northern life, and preserved by a people who understood that even the darkest forms might carry the seed of restoration within them. In the centuries that followed, the kingdom of the Lindworm Prince faded from the certainty of history into the softer realm of legend, yet its shape remained fixed within the collective memory of the North. The landscapes that gave birth to the tale did not vanish. Pine forests continued to stretch across rocky soil, rivers still cut their winding paths toward cold seas, and long winters pressed silence into the bones of those who lived there. It was within such enduring surroundings that stories became vessels of knowledge, preserving lessons more reliable than fragile records etched on parchment. Medieval Scandinavian storytellers understood that memory survived best when bound to imagery. The lindworm, half serpent and half man, was not merely a creature of fear, but a symbol of boundaries crossed and endured. In a world where survival depended on respecting nature's rhythms, the serpent's ability to shed its skin became a powerful metaphor. Archaeological evidence suggests that snake symbolism appeared in Bronze Age Scandinavia long before the Viking Age, carved into rock art alongside ships and sun wheels. These carvings hint at beliefs linking serpents to cycles of death and rebirth, an idea that found its human reflection in the Curse of Prince. As Christianity spread northward, old stories were not erased but reshaped. The Lindworm Prince began to be told with subtle moral emphasis, highlighting restraint, humility, and the redemptive power of patience. Unlike later fairy tales that favored sudden miracles, this legend retained its slow pace. The curse was lifted through ritual repetition and endurance, not through violence. Such structure aligned with early Christian monastic ideals spreading through Scandinavia, where self-discipline and gradual transformation were seen as paths toward spiritual clarity. The elder prince's refusal to seize the throne by force also mirrored changing social values. Law codes emerging in medieval Scandinavia emphasized mediation over blood feud, a shift reflected in historical assemblies known as things, where disputes were settled through speech rather than swords. The tale echoed this evolution, presenting a ruler shaped not by conquest but by self-mastery. Natural features of the North continued to reinforce the story's power. Caves and deep stone chambers, like the one that held the Lindworm, were real places of awe and danger. In Norway and Sweden, archaeologists have discovered ancient cave sites bearing traces of ritual use, suggesting these spaces were viewed as thresholds between worlds. To listeners, the prince's emergence from such a place would have felt profoundly believable, grounded in landscapes they knew and respected. Even clothing played a symbolic role remembered by generations. The layered garments worn by the woman reflected real textile practices of early medieval Scandinavia, where linen undergarments and woolen outer layers were common. Removing these layers slowly through the night mirrored not only the serpent's shedding but the careful unraveling of fear itself. In a harsh climate, clothing was protection, status, and survival. To part with it deliberately was an act of extraordinary courage, one that elevated the woman's wisdom beyond physical bravery. Over time, the Lindworm Prince became more than a single story. It merged with regional variations across Denmark, Sweden, Norway, and parts of northern Germany. In some tellings, the serpent grew vast enough to encircle castles. In others, it dwelled in wells or under bridges, places associated with transition and danger. Yet the core remained unchanged. What is born from desperation may return as burden, and what is endured with patience may be transformed. Scholars studying comparative mythology have noted striking parallels between the Lindworm Prince and serpent bridegroom tales found across Eurasia. These similarities suggest ancient shared roots, perhaps carried along trade routes that connected the Baltic to distant lands. Amber from Scandinavian shores has been found in Mediterranean tombs, evidence of long-distance exchange. Along with goods traveled ideas, symbols, and stories, adapting themselves to new landscapes while retaining their ancient heart. Despite these wide connections, the Lindworm Prince remained distinctly northern. The cold, the darkness, and the slow return of light shaped every aspect of the tale. Redemption came not at sunrise but at dawn, gradual and uncertain. This reflected a worldview born under skies where the sun's return after winter was never taken for granted. In such a world, hope was cautious, earned through endurance rather than expected as a gift. By the late medieval period, as written literature began to replace oral transmission, the story was preserved in folk collections. Though altered by time, its restraint endured. The monster was never fully condemned, nor was his past erased. The prince carried his memory forward as warning and wisdom, embodying the belief that leadership required intimate knowledge of darkness as well as light. Today, the tale remains carved into the cultural bedrock of the North, as enduring as the forests and stones that once framed its telling. It survives because it speaks to truths that transcend era and belief. That fear grows when hidden, that transformation demands patience, and that even the most terrifying forms may hold the possibility of restoration when met with understanding rather than force. As the imagined firelight fades and the ancient hall grows quiet, the Lindworm Prince returns to legend, leaving behind not a roar, but a lesson whispered across centuries, coiled carefully within the memory of humanity. If these ancient voices touched your heart today, please consider subscribing to Ancient Epics and ringing the bell so you never miss the next forgotten tale. Thanks for watching.